Hello, everybody. How we doing? So you got to hear a little bit about San Diego. And if you're out on the patio, you can look out. You can see the San Diego Bay, and behind that is Coronado, and the other side of that is the ocean, for those of you who are not from here. We're going to do the land back panel. Theresa Harlan and Stan Rodriguez. So if you two would come up to the stage, it's my honor to introduce both of these individuals. And I think it's important. We've been listening to the stories from generation to generation. You know, you saw the history of Mexico and the United States, of San Diego, Tijuana. But I think what's missing, and that's what this panel will focus on, is that we are all, to some degree, indigenas. I'm sorry, Cortez could not have conquered all of Mexico and made us all la raza cósmica. That was a strategy to really keep us from recognizing our indigenous roots. I personally am Chican India, raised here in San Diego, but it's not my story. I'd like to introduce Theresa Harlan, who's the executive director of All for Felix Cove. Felix Cove is part of the Point Reyes National Seashore, where it goes around to Tamales Bay, and the cove is right in there. And that's her ancestral home she'll talk about to you. You heard Stan Rodriguez today from the Santa Isabel Reservation. But I need to tell you, both of these two individuals have been doing the work that they do for at least 40 to 50 years. And it's important for you to understand how we are all integrated. I will even take it a step further. Even in the presentation that Sonia Lopez gave today, and she was pointing out individuals, there was Tommy Camarillo in there, who is a founder of the Chicano, not a founder, but she ran the Chicano Park Steering Committee for many years, Chican India. You see her, that's what she is. Irene Mena, Chicana Filipina. And I think it's important to recognize we have indigenous roots, and we need to validate that. Yes, this is the Latinos and Heritage Conservation, but that's who we are. And we were taught to not deal with our indigenous roots. And these two people have been working to preserve the history of their culture and all of our culture. So if you would both come up to the stage, and I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit further when you start talking about your presentation, because otherwise I'll stay up here all day. That's not bad. So Theresa, and Stan, if you could both come up.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So great to be here with all of you relatives. I hope you can see me over the podium. And maybe I can even take care of it this way. So, open toesh. Buenas tardes. Inxche from my husband's family, and Quatzihopa from my New Mexico family. And everyone who has been talking today and all our conversations, it's really just full circle that we are all relatives. You know, we all share our relationship to this earth, to our mother. Our Pacific Ocean is out there. As Josie mentioned, my family's from Tamales Bay, and the Pacific Ocean is our mother too. And so we share that. We go to her. Tamauliwa is Tamales Bay in the Tamalco family. So I come from two mothers. My mother, who birthed me, is from Quewa Pueblo. My dad, Jemez Pueblo. But life was the way it was, and she couldn't raise me. And so she put me up for adoption, but in a way, the ancestors made way for me to land with my mom who raised me, who is Cosmiwak, Talmoco, Tamales Bay Indian from Point Reyes. And so that's how I was raised. I was raised on the stories of Tamauliwa. I was raised by my aunties and my uncles and my mom and my dad to know the stories of the Bay. And so my mom's ancestors go back 700 generations. Over 15,000 years, their ancestors could walk to the Farallon Islands. And they lived sustainably, how people would love to live now. That was their life. They had no running water, no electricity. And they were descendants of generations of colonization. So they lived at this cove with this house that was built by their grandpas, Joe and Ben Felix. Their great-grandma, Euphrasia Felix, left the missions when Mexico secularized the missions, and she met her Filipino husband, Domingo Felix, in Yerba Buena, not San Francisco, Yerba Buena. And she came back. They came back to the cove. They came back to Tamauliwa. What we don't know is if this cove, was her original home since time immemorial, or if it was a cove that they settled. But still, the lands were their ancestral homelands. And so their descendants were raised on the cove. This is my Uncle Victor Souza. He's the son of Bertha Felix, my grandma, the grandson of Joe Felix, the great-grandson of Euphrasia Felix, and again, the descendant of over 600 generations of Tamalco ancestors. Uncle Vic is an important figure, and so we talk about ancestors talking to us. Uncle Vic passed when I was 6 years old. My grandma passed before I was born in 1949. After she passed, the White Ranchers, so Point Reyes National Seashore, if you've ever been there, it's known for the dairy ranching. It's not known for Coast Miwok, Tamalco people. It's known for like when they had contact with Drake, and then there's nothing about them after that. There's no stories about how they continue to survive by their labor, by working on the ranches, by fishing, by picking fruits. They would move up north sometimes and pick the crops. But after my grandma died, my mom was told that the rancher, K-Ranch owner, wanted his land back now that the old lady died. And so they told my uncle and my grandpa, who were still living there, to leave. Well, my uncle was smart. He refused to leave. He made them go to court and serve them eviction papers. And I don't know how he made it, but he somehow crossed paths. This is divine intervention, crossed paths with the district attorney of Marin County. And the DA, William Wysick, represented him. And he said this case of eviction should not be heard in California courts because it was an issue of the Treaty of Guadalupe del Algo, that it was a UN issue. And so they fought in court. They had a witness that would testify that the family was there before the ranchers. My uncle was forced to use squatters' rights law that said in 1878, well, first in 1870, if you own the land, if you lived on the land for 5 years and fenced it, you could own it. Well, that allowed all the colonial settlers to come in and establish their residences and their farms and their ranches and their wineries. And then they amended the law in 1878, so you had to prove that you paid county property tax. And so what my uncle's court, what his defense was that they were there before that law was amended in 1878. But the judge disallowed the oral testimony. My uncle lost the case. They appealed it, and they lost the appeal. And so in 1956, my older sister, she remembers going to the house. So this is lived experience. This isn't me telling you what happened 100 years ago. This is my mother, my sister's living memory of going to the home. And so she got to experience it. My uncle left, our family left in 1956, and then the rancher left it empty, and then an artist came, a white artist came, saw it. You saw the home, the barns, the corral, the sheds. Those were all built by our family. He made a deal with the rancher He lived there, and when the rancher sold the land to the national park to create the Point Reyes National Seashore, he made a deal with the park, got a special use permit, and he lived there till 1995 until he died. And then the park policy is to demolish homes that are no longer inhabited. And so they were going to demolish it. Friends of the artist fought about it. My mom, she kept a subscription to the local newspaper, the Point Reyes Light. She's read it. She got mad. We wrote a letter to the editor. You know, we didn't know. We didn't know we should contact the superintendent or a legislator. We didn't know. We just wrote a letter to the editor saying, hey, that's Coast Miwok. That history of that house goes beyond that artist. But that artist family saved that house. And then it's empty, was vandalized, called Ghost House. Kayakers can go by it. Hikers can discover it. And then in 2015, the national park wanted to demolish it again because they saw it as a liability. It's not protected. It's not lived in. But it was saved in 2015. It was saved because they had to contact the State Historic Preservation Officer, the SHPO. And today I meet Julianne Polanco. Julianne, sorry I'm messing up your name, but Julie protected our home because it's still standing. What she did is she told National Park Service, go talk to Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, and then they got involved, and then they that stopped the demolishing of the house, and then they got interested, and then they held a meeting with their citizens. I'm not a citizen of Great Rancheria, but my cousins told my sister and I about it, and we told other people about it, and we crashed the meeting, and you know, we didn't really know what was going on, and so much emotion. Family is everything, right? So when the park is talking about what they're going to do with our family home, I started crying because my mom had passed in 1998, and this was 2017, and as you can tell, it's still here. But I was so happy that they said, oh, the park said, we're going to restore it to the way your mom had it when she was growing up. And this is a photo of my Uncle Gene, my mom, and my Aunt Jill on the steps of the house. So I didn't ask, like, who's funding this? Who's making the decisions? What do you mean you're going to restore it to where the way when my mom was living there? Who's going to be part of it? I was just like so happy. And then I called, what's going on? Nothing. I called again, what's going on? I gave them pictures for the wayside. They wrote up a draft, shared it with me, and then I was retiring. I retired 25 years with the state. And I was worried that they wouldn't have my email. Nothing, crickets. And so then I started talking around to advocates and got a hold of the new superintendent. So the politics, the mapping, the histories, all of it converges on this little house, this little place, the stories, the passion, our family. You know, when you go to the park, you hear about the white ranchers' history, 160 years of dairy ranching, butter production, but you don't hear about our family. Our family was the last family to live on the west shores of Tomales Bay. And so in order to amplify our message, I had to create an organization. And I asked Indigenous leaders to come help me imagine what this organization would be like. And I invited men and women, but it was the women who showed up. It was the women who, you know, create out of nothing, out of heart and passion, out of pain. And so one of our sisters, Josie Talamantes, and this is why, you know, from her invitation, I'm here. She's one of our Strawberry Leadership Sisters. And we call ourselves the Strawberry Leadership Circle because my mom grew up loving to taste and pick fresh strawberries, coastal strawberries. And so we are like the strawberry plant. We send out our runners every year hoping to catch some nourishment. Even though when there's no water, there's too much sun, there's invasives, there's powers that are stronger than us, or appear to be, we still send out our runners, we still bloom, we still flower. And so we are a women, collective of indigenous women, and we are governed by principles of respect, responsibility, generosity, reciprocity, relationship. And that's all that we're seeing here today. So it's such an honor to be here. And our strategies are to advocate for telling our story, right? Telling the story of our family and building relationship with allies, building relationship with National Park Service leadership, creating access so that people of color, indigenous folks, when you come to Point Reyes National Seashore and you see over 400 miles of barbed wire fencing, you know you're on public land, you know you are welcomed, you know you are home. And so that's what we're working to change, and we're working to steward our homeland, and we're going back and learning to build tule canoes. I was telling Stan, you know, we're gonna have to build tule canoes together. And we're teaching, because all of this is for the next generation, right? All of this is for sharing. And so we share how to harvest tule, we share how to build tule canoes. This year we're gonna build tule mats. And so, you know, national parks, this is our you know, the conflict, the challenge, and that there are indigenous homelands. We go there not just to recreate, we go there to pray, we go there to go home, we go there to heal. And we are benefiting from the BIPOC land return, rematriation, traditional ecological knowledge, the outdoor movements, all of your work that even though we may not even know each other yet, we benefit from the work that you have been doing, because it's the same. It's about family, it's about story. And we've made, luckily from our dear sister Maite, we got into a meeting with Secretary Harlan to talk about access, a very closed meeting, and there was 3 nonprofits and we were one. So, you know, my heart, my love for Maite and Josie and Julianne, you know. I got to tell her my story, but, you know, bureaucracies. You know, when we go to Secretary Harlan, we got to go back to the superintendent. And so, you know, when he's retired now, but Craig Kinkle, when he first came on, we invited him to our home. We invited him as a guest to our home to talk about the meanings that our home has for us. It's still standing, the interior floors are rotted. My elder cousins, they want to go inside the home of their mothers. My cousins, they want to go home inside the home of their grandmas. And we want that to happen while they're still living. The park actually invited us to begin the process of a cooperative agreement as a nonprofit, and based on policy that we are direct descendants to that land. And so we submitted a vision plan that is now under Section 106 consultation with Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. We're waiting for their response. But our vision is to create an indigenous site of resiliency, embodying history, culture, ecological science, community, and justice, for it to be a transformational place of healing, beauty, and creativity, where all can deepen their relationship to Mother Earth and honor Tamolko Coast Miwok ancestors. That's what we want. We want, when you come in, you see the beauty, and you don't see neglect. So we don't wait, as we all know. We're in this room of activators, right? So this is photos from our Indigenous youth kayak program last year. We built this tule canoe in one day. We had harvested the tule a month before and let it season. But before I end, I want to share this video, but I don't see how I can click on to the video that's embedded in the PowerPoint. Can I have some help with that? Oh, okay, thank you. So one thing I'm going to leave you with is growing up, my mom said, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? I believe that. That's all right. If you go to our website, and I didn't put up our website, but it's www.alliance4felixcove.org, and the video is there. And we also have a podcast called Coming Home, a story of family and stolen land. So we have lots of good things on our website if you want to learn more about us. But such an honor to be here with all of you today. Wali Kamolas. Okay, thank you.
You're not here to learn how to make a boat. You're here to be in a community. You may not be able to do every single part of all the steps that it takes to do the boat. So our job here today is to figure out where do we fit in that process.
Felix Cove, which is on Tamales Bay. It's where my family, my mom was raised with her siblings and her mom and her mom and her mom and so forth. And so it's this little cove. The house that her grandpa built is still standing. So we're trying to really bring greater visibility for the protection of it.
Kana Chochenyo Oloni. I'm Chochenyo Oloni. I have not worked with natural materials before in terms of straight from the earth until the recent cordage making workshop. We didn't get the opportunity for our mom to teach us her skills and her ability. So this project is all about bringing Native people back on the water.
It's really turning back to our indigenous roots, and that's not just indigenous to North America or Central America or South America. Indigenous roots everywhere were that we were all connected and we were all parts of community.
This is what we've been making. I know, it's incredible.
Well, we can make a path. I didn't like to be out in the woods because I'd feel all this sadness. But today we have a chance to come back in a good way. Respect Mother Earth for all the things that she gives us. So when I had that dream in a place like this, and when seeing all of your faces here today, it brings me a lot of joy inside.
Tamale was the Tamal name for Tamales Bay. Saka is the Tamal name for canoe.
Help people understand that we're all brothers and sisters together in this world. We need to bring peace.
for the,
Dipping her in the bay is beginning her relationship with the water, with Tamauliwa.
Okay, Benjamin. And when I say Hauka, it means more than hello. It means may that fire in your body, your soul, continue to glow brightly. So, I want to talk a little bit about history and how it impacts us natives today. How many of you are history buffs? Okay, a few of you. All right. You put in pen, you wait, never lie, you one man school, yeah. Class begins. Tell me about the history of San Diego. So far, nobody's a teacher's pet. Yes. The 1520s. All right, well, you got the 15s right. 1542, September 27th. Who was it that came? Say John in Spanish. Juan Cabrillo Rodriguez, no relation to me. Landed out here in Point Loma in the bay. And the Portuguese, they have a doing out here where they have some people dressed up as, what do they call them? Conquistadors. And I only have okay. I was watching, I only had 4 seconds left. Okay. So, are you Portuguese? All right, you didn't want to hear it. Huh? So anyway, they have these people dressed up like Spanish conquistadors on a whaleboat land over here, and people dressed up like Kumeyaay, who genuflex in front of the flag and the Spanish cross. That's their big celebration. Now let me ask you this, did it really go down like that? What happened? What's that? Well, they got their noses punched. Yeah, they tried to fish without asking for permission. Kumeyaay attacked them. A few of them got shot with arrows. They were able to make peace and they left. Then they got whacked by the Chumash up north. You don't hear about that in the history books. And our people have dealt with 3 waves of encroachment. 3 waves. And then they came back again. When did they come back? When did the Spaniards come back? Nobody. Fine, okay. Remediation, all of you. In 1769, Father Sarah, you're looking, huh? All right. Father Sarah came, they put the first mission up. What have you learned about missions? Huh? The what? 4th grade. You built the mission, right? You turned it in. Woo. Okay. You know, where did the concept of missions come from? Who? Catholics? Colonization? All that? Genocide? Going back to the Spanish conquistadors. They were never really conquerors. They never had the numbers. What they were excellent as were as instigators. You're fighting this group. I come over and I say, hey, those people are bad people. I'll help you. I'll help you. Let's go jump them together. I'll be right behind you all the way. Boom. They would let the natives do the heavy lifting with each other, and they come in and clean up. And then they would use the vanquished natives. Now you're going to be part of our army. You know, it happened. It happened in Mexico. It happened in Peru with Mexica, that triple alliance. They never had the numbers, but they took them because those alliances were stratified. They had a caste system, upper, middle, and lower. So one of the things that they would do, let's say you're the chief, whack the chief, marry the daughter. Supplies, you know, all these things would go up. The people say, well, she's still one of us. But instead of it being redistributed to the people who went to Spain and the Catholic Church, people were starving. Kashkin Rebellion almost drove the Spaniards out of Mexico. But then they used Tlaxcalan and Aztec armies to defeat them. Then there was another one. And this was Chichimeca War. How long did that last? How much? Oh, let me help you. Almost 50 years. And in that, they almost ran them out. And there was a difference. Because the Chichimeca people were not stratified. They kept moving. Let's say you were the chief. They killed you. Your sister took up arms, kept going, and the people kept moving. They could not do siege. So this is where they weaponized the missions to separate the women from the men from the children and control everybody. What they were going to do is they were going to indoctrinate them into Catholicism, teach them rudimentary skills in anticipation of Spanish colonists coming. They would already have a servant caste trained and ready to go. This is what they brought first in La Paz and Baja Sur. How many of you ever been to Baja Sur? How does it look out there? How does Baja Sur look? It's a tourist resort, right? It's nice. You can work on your tan. It's deserty. What is the problem with desert? That our people already know. Food and water are limited. So if you're going to thrive in an environment like that, you have to be mobile. Because you have to allow the area that you're in time to recharge itself. We know that. You know, when we talk about nature, Western ways of thinking is nature is everything but humans. With our people, we are part of that narrative. We are another animal. I mean, they're our relatives. So when they brought the missions, they sequestered the people. They kept the people in that area. What tribal group is in Baja Sur at the tip? The Piriku. Above them is a Waikura. Above them is a Cochimi. And then you're getting into Kiliwa, Pai Pai, Kumeyaay, Kokopa, or Chipai areas. The Piriku and the Waikura do not exist anymore. They died from diseases and mishandling. So when they came in 1769, they put a mission over here by Old Town. And that mission was put up July 15th. 1 month later, August 15th, our people attacked that mission. Later on, they moved what was left to where it's at now. And then what happened November 5th, 1775? Hundreds of Kumeyaay warriors converged on the mission, attacked it, burned it to the ground, killed Father Jaime and 2 others. All the missions in Kumeyaay territory were attacked, burned down. The ones on Quetzal territory, the desert Kumeyaay and Quetzal, attacked those 2. La Misión. How many of you ever been to Ensenada? Anybody? From Tijuana? All right. What's in between Tijuana and Ensenada? Who? Oh my God. In between Tijuana and Ensenada. La Misión. Okay, good answer. Yeah, teacher's pet now. And that mission was attacked. The priest hid under a woman's skirt. The Hatni, who was the chief, then they left him. They found him a month later and whacked him. But it was because of atrocities that were being committed. And then we talk about the Mexican era and what they were going to do. They were going to secularize the missions. In Mexico, during the battle for independence, there were 2 main factions. One, the majority was the indigenous faction who were fighting for freedom, and then there was another, the Spaniards who were born in Mexico, who wanted to, they thought that the Spanish government was being too liberal, and they wanted to go back to the old way of doing things. So these were the ones that were buying the land out by the mission, or were getting the grants for the missions, and they were creating estancias. The Kumeyaay then attacked the mission in the areas out here, the different ranchos, and 3 times almost pushed the Spaniards or the Californios into the ocean. Last time they were out by Point Loma, and they were waiting for a boat to take them out of here to evacuate them. It was a British schooner that used cannon fire to repel the attack, but it was continuing. So what was happening then later on? Mexico, they were in California for about 20-some years. Then what happened? Before the gold was discovered, there was war, the Mexican-American War. What was the Mexican-American War all about? Huh? Land. Yeah. Why did the United States even care about California? They haven't discovered it yet. Oh, that was beautiful. Yes, thank you, Dr. Pulido. Yes, Texas had already declared independence from Mexico, and they wanted to be admitted into the Union. However, they were a slave state. And if they would have been admitted, it would have tipped the balance between slave and free states. So the United States needed one more state in order to keep it balanced. So that's why they instigated a war with Mexico. Now, when that happened, where was the only battle of the Mexican-American War held at in California? You're not from around here, are you? Oh, yeah. The who? The Battle of Bakersfield? What? It was the Battle of San Pascual. Some people say the Battle of the Wild Animal Park. But, yeah, it was up here. How long did the battle last? Somebody said 3 years one time. The war only lasted 2 years, but it lasted 2 days. And who won the battle? The Irish won? Yeah. Who won between the Mexicans and the Americans in that battle? Yeah. They ran right in the middle of a Kumeyaay village, but between the Mexicans and the Americans, who won that battle? I know you know, even if you don't know it yet. Who? All right, she won, yeah. Give her a hand. All right. Teacher's pet. All right, so Mexico won the battle but lost the war. Then gold was discovered in California. Now, California has more language diversity than any other place in the world, aside from Papua New Guinea. Or different tribal groups, hundreds of different nations. When gold was discovered, the first governor, whose name was Peter Burnett, he hated Mexicans, he hated blacks, he hated Asians, but he hated the natives the most. And in his inauguration address, he stated that the war of extermination will continue between the red man and the white man until all Indians are exterminated. This was our first governor in California. So, Native people had no rights. White people could legally hunt natives and profit from their death. Children were 50 cents for their heads. Women were $2.50 for their heads. Men were $5 for their heads. And this is, I'm not making these figures up. This is historic. The United States government compensated California for $1.5 million for the extermination of Native people in California. Now, Mexicans had more rights than Native people in California. They were considered a cut above. Mexicans had some rights. What was the treaty that ended hostilities between the United States and Mexico? Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, right? And in that treaty, what did they state? Yes, that the United States will respect the communities and land rights of the people residing in those areas that are now going into the jurisdiction of the United States. When were natives given citizenship? '19, 23, 24. Yeah, that's when they were given citizenship. However, some people didn't receive the memo, and things continued. So what happened? Native people could not testify against a white man or woman. In court of law, we could not be in juries. We were not citizens, and they did not respect our land rights. So what happened then was, and the tribal groups up in your area, your people, the tribal groups bore the brunt of the genocide. It was a Holocaust. Whole nations were eradicated. I'm talking about the language, the culture, the history, everything about that. Even the name of the people is gone forever. Can you imagine a library that vast of knowledge just burning to the ground and nobody knows? And this happened multiple times. And it's not talked about. It's not talked about. But so many of the native people hid in Mexican communities. They would try to assimilate, just disappear. Like I said, they had more rights. Down here in San Diego, during the mission days, the waning days of the missions, the Spanish soldiers were moved down into the interior of Mexico. And the mission priests were left with a bunch of angry natives. If you were in town where everybody hated your guts, what would you do? And you couldn't leave. Just for a moment, then you'd be overrun. So you can go that round. We don't know where she went. Or you can do this. Mi gente, my people, let's work together. And this is what the priests did. They did two things that the Spanish government considered illegal. They taught the natives how to ride and use horses, and gave them firearms. This helped when our people were fighting against the Mexican government. So, in other words, the native people in Southern California were much more better armed. So what happened in 1851, there was a Hungarian sheriff in Old Town San Diego. He started taxing the native people exorbitant amounts for their cattle, their horses, and their sheep, goats, whatever. So what happened was a man named Antonio Gara, who was the chief over at Cupa. He married a Cupa woman, but he was Desert Kumeyaay Community. And he said, we need to run these people out, because when the United States first got hold of California, this was a population, over 80% was native. Less than 20% was non-native. So we had the numbers, we had firearms. So devised an attack in 1851. One group, which were Chumash and Yokuts from the valley, were going to attack and overrun Santa Barbara. Another group, which was Kumeyaay and Cupeño, were going to attack Los Angeles. Now, LA did not look like it does today. It was attackable. Another group of Kumeyaay and Quezon were going to attack San Diego. And then another group of Cocopah, Quezon, Mojave, and Desert Kumeyaay, I didn't leave you guys out. We're going to attack the forts on the Colorado River and secure that, because that's how the Americans were going to rearm through there. So the goal was to run them out. We had the numbers, we had the weapons, but we did not have the unity. Korea's made a separate deal with the American government, and they turned on all the groups. The Yokuts made a treaty with the American government, so they were out of it. So in the end, Antonio Gara was betrayed, captured, brought to San Diego, and on January, he was found, January 9th, 1852, found guilty of treason, murder, and theft. He was executed out by Old Town. His last words were, "Please forgive me for my doings, and I'm waiting to hear you asking for forgiveness from me." They shot him instead. 1 year later, an appeals court ruled in favor of Antonio Gara because he was not an American citizen, so he could not be charged with treason. Theft, he was trying to keep the land that the Americans were stealing. Remember what you're talking about. And murder. Public officials like the presidents can wage war, and they cannot be charged with murder. But it was a year too late. So what was happening was 18 treaties were made by the federal government. 18 treaties in California. The Treaty of San Isabel, which was signed January 2nd, 1852, gave us a reservation from the Mexican border all the way to Riverside County, and from east of El Cajon all the way to Imperial County. One reservation for us. This was in 1852. But what was happening around 1852? What's that? Gold rush was happening. People were being just slaughtered up north. But what else was happening? This was on the eve of the Civil War. So a lot of people were coming in from the Carolinas, Georgia, places like that. And they had Confederate leanings. So what they did was they went to the federal government and said, if you ratify these treaties, we will side with the Confederacy. Remember, they want to keep California a free state. So what happened, all 18 treaties were locked in somebody's desk drawer for 40 years. The treaties were never ratified. The Native people of California did not abrogate on any provisions of the treaties. It was all the American government, because of greed, that took it. So then, when, so for 40 years, our people were being put into bondage, slavery. This is how this worked. Let's say you're Kumeyaay. Do you speak English? No, not yet. I see you walking around. Do you work for anybody? You don't understand me, huh? Well, here I'm taking you in front of the judge because you're a vagrant. Yep. You pass a vagrancy law. You've been charged with vagrancy. You found to be vagrant. $5 fine. Do you have money? No. So let's say you need somebody working in your field. You pay the $5 fine. You go with him for 6 months. You don't understand what 6 months is. After that, you sell him to another. You spend the rest of your life in bondage. This is what was happening with Native people, and we were staying in our areas, and most of our strongholds were in the mountains. So, executive order was created to make reservations. However, well, in California, there's over 100 reservations that have been made for the various groups. Now, there's still over 60 federally unrecognized tribes in California. Let me tell you what that means. To have a reservation, to be federally recognized, we have a government-to-government relationship with the United States. There's three tiers: federally recognized, state recognized, and non-federally recognized. State recognized, there are no state recognized tribes in California. You're either federally recognized or you're not recognized. And if you're not recognized, you have no recourse. You have no rights to the land. It's very difficult. And being non-federally recognized does not make you any less Native. It just talks about the rights. And then we have other groups that have come into California from other tribes, from other different states, who come in, part of the Indian Relocation Act, and who live here, the urban Indians, we call them. And then there's other groups who have come in. Remember I told you half of our nation is in Mexico. Baja, Sonora, places like this. People come and go. We have that. So, other groups, other indigenous groups from Mexico. Let me ask, who here is indigenous from Oaxaca? Okay. How many people from Oaxaca, indigenous groups, live in San Diego County? A lot. The indigenous people from San Diego, probably about 10,000 indigenous to San Diego. People from Oaxaca, just in Linda Vista, over 20,000. Much more up in the North County, everywhere. If you go into Imperial County, large Purepecha population. Up in LA, large Mayan population. Nawa groups, Yoema groups, all over coming in. But the federal government will only recognize people who are federally recognized, who've already been federally recognized. So this is a problem for people who are working on their identity. Because you see what happens through diaspora of a nation. People do the language, the culture, all these things go dormant. And the individuals that talked earlier talked about the prison system and what has happened there. When we lose our culture, our ceremonies, such as our puberty ceremonies, and in our puberty ceremonies, we teach a young woman, young lady, what it means to be a woman and her roles and responsibilities. We teach a young boy how to be a young man, his roles and responsibilities to himself, to his family, to the people, all of these, with each other. What happens when we're not teaching that? What happens when it creates a void? It creates false rites of passage. We see that joining gangs, going to prison, teenage pregnancy, all these things that are happening, alcohol, drug abuse, all different types of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual. And this is what's important, again, because in our ceremonies is our spirituality. It's who we are. We talk about what it is to be a human being. And when we're here, and when we leave this, what will be expected of us? When I told you earlier, talk about the puberty ceremony, not the puberty ceremony, but our creation story. 4 days to tell. It talks about all these different things and what is expected of us. So, just a little bit about the Kumeyaay culture that we're reviving. Some people talk about us in the past tense. Natives used to be here. I'm sure you heard that too. And I'm going to be honest with you. I did make tule boats. I did harvest seaweed. I did catch grunion 2 days ago. And I'll do it again next month. We are people of the past, present, and future. I think it's important to remember that. And last thing I want to say, there's a pet peeve. How many of you ever like to watch novellas? You know what? I have to say this, man. Where do they put the native people in the novellas? Outside herding the goats, huh? Yeah, and the ones that are the stars, blonde hair, blue eyes. We need to decolonize ourselves. We need to get that narrative out. I'm dark, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I love the way I look. I'm gonna give myself a hug. And I just wanted to share that with all of you. And, as we continue to grow, I told you all, we're all native from somewhere. When you embrace your own indigeneity, you grow, you learn. We hear about people talking about building an atmosphere of tolerance. How many of you have ever heard that? Tolerance. Tolerance is, to me, is a negative. I tolerate the mosquito bite, or I tolerate the inclement weather, or I tolerate this. But when we grow and we support each other, and we build a sense of celebration of the diversity that we all have with each other, then we all grow together. So until then, when we sing our songs, that is resistance. When we talk our own language, that is resistance. When we do our ceremonies, that is resistance. When we inhabit our lands and do that in a spiritual way, that is resistance. And we do that with love. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it. I wanted to get a picture of all of you.
How about another hand for the land back discussion and history of Native communities in California? And this kind of terminates this portion of our conference. The reception is on the 3rd floor at the West Gate, and I don't know if many of you are taking the trolley. I think it's $2.50, and it'll leave you right there, right by the West Gate. So the reception starts at 6 o'clock. So we'll see you over there.